Josh, I'm not trying to pull a Eric Ainge about Georgia fans here, but I will say people talk about the tough environment on the swamp, but we had John Adams on Tuesday, and he said something I've always agreed with, which is I think Florida has one of the most fickle fan bases in the SEC. And so do you think it's possible that even though it's a night game, that loss to Utah, that there's just a massive amount of apathy when Tennessee goes down to the swamp and it's not really going to give them much trouble?
I think that could happen if Tennessee jumps out to a lead and gets up early. Florida fans could say, okay, here we go. This team's no good. But my understanding is that they're expecting a big crowd for the game. And if that's true, Florida fans will have all day long to get ready. It's still week 3 and it's the SEC opener and it's Tennessee coming to town. And this is a top 10 team. And night games at the Swamp have to be different for them, similar to how we talk about in Knoxville or in Columbia, South Carolina, or go through a bunch of SEC towns where football matters. So talking to Edgar Thompson of the Orlando Sentinel on my show on Wednesday, he said that he believes there will be a big, excited crowd to start out. But if things don't go well for Florida, then Tennessee could take advantage, and you could be looking at a stadium that has emptied out a lot of fans by the end if Tennessee is able to control the game and win. And we'd be talking about taking over stadiums similar to LSU last year, or on the flip side, how we've seen Neyland Stadium when things didn't go well for Tennessee at different times. So that's the goal, is to go out, play well early, shut up the fans, and then send those fans on home earlier than they expect.
Okay, guys, I'm going to make one of us public enemy number one with Tennessee's fan base. And I want to get into this battered Vols syndrome that I think should be dead. But let me ask you this. Who has the better fan base heading into a game like this? Josh, you mentioned that Florida's fans will show up, but I know from personal experience, and you know probably from talking to Edgar, if things go south, they're going to get quiet, unlike an LSU group or some other, South Carolina for that matter, Mississippi State. I mean, they stay loud even when they're losing. So on the other side, you've got a Tennessee fan base that, let's say, has had its not so great moments in the past. Who has a better fan base leading into this game?
I think the Tennessee fan base. I think the Tennessee fan base is better at supporting other sports because Florida baseball has been a big deal. Florida baseball support could have been better at different times. Football is obviously king. But yeah, the Tennessee fan base has had its ugly moments. And let's not act like they have been selling out the stadium year in, year out when the team was down. When the team was down, there were a lot of fans that said, tell me when you're good again, and I'll start coming back to the game. So it's not like, look at Nebraska. Nebraska's fan base has made sure to continue showing up to watch awful football in awful weather. Tennessee fans have not often done that. But I would still say, the better fan base, friendlier to opposing fans than when opposing fans go to Gainesville to see a game at the Swamp.
Did you hear Nebraska is actually going to have an open press box before I kick to Caleb so that they have less media coverage and can control content even more? They're going to have an open press box during November and October when it's freezing. Did you hear that? I'm joking. I made that up.
Okay, no,
that would be the way. That would be the way to get less coverage. Like, I'm not going to watch that football team in November. Better fan base, Caleb, headed into a game like this. Is it Florida or Tennessee? And then I'm going to give what I believe is going to be an unpopular position.
Josh Ward is very diplomatic there. It's not close. It's Tennessee. And just a couple of stats on this. Florida, I think Tennessee. So Thompson-Boling Arena is twice the size of their basketball arena. Stephen O'Connell, isn't that what it's called? The Stephen O'Connell Center?
Yes.
Thompson-Boling Arena is twice the size of the basketball arena. When Florida was winning their national championships in basketball, Tennessee was selling out a higher percentage of selling. They were filling a higher percentage of Thompson-Boling than Florida was in arena half the size. Florida fans are super fickle. And I actually think, Josh, I'm sorry, I'm going to push back. I think Tennessee fans not showing up after a while was a good thing. Because I'm just going to say this. I don't think you should be loyal to your program if your program is completely incompetent over a period of time. I think that's why Nebraska has been terrible at football. They can go and sneak in a Bill Callahan hire or a Mike Riley hire because they know their fans are going to show up for the game no matter what. and they don't put pressure on themselves. I think I totally reject this notion that you should always show up even when your team and program is totally incompetent. No, totally disagree with that, because then you are rewarding failure. If a store or a company said, you should buy our products, even if our products are terrible, you guys were like, no, we're not buying your product. Give me a good product to buy. So I think there is a bit of a balance between following the team, even when they're bad, and actually willing to patronize the product. And I think Tennessee fans struck that balance well.
Yeah, I still think you can get coaches fired, though, showing up to the games, because the big money people call and say, this is not going to cut it, get him out of there, they'll fire that person.
That's true. I think they're the same. 20 years ago, 25 years ago in the 90s, are you guys familiar with the term nouveau riche? Are you familiar with that term? Nouveau riche means somebody like just won the lottery and they didn't come up through money. So that's what Florida was in the 90s. They were nouveau riche. They were rich, but they didn't know how to handle it. And they're the guys who go out and buy the solid gold yacht instead of being like a Kennedy that came up through that. So I think that 25 years ago, Tennessee had by far the better fan base. I now think that since Florida has had success, Josh, that they're pretty similar. They're not going to show up if the team's down. They are still going to support. They're going to get mad if a coach doesn't do what they think they are. I think they're pretty similar now. But when you and I first met, congratulations on 22 years at WNML, by the way, this week. I always thought you'd go back to school. But back then, when you and I met, I thought that Tennessee's fan base was way better because of tradition. Nowadays, you've had a generation's worth of pretty good tradition with Meyer and Spurrier.
Yeah, I haven't gotten my cake yet for the 22 years.
You get a gold one. No, you get an Emmitt Smith plaque. That's what you get, 22.
Okay, I'll take that. Speaking of a former Gator. Well, also this, like when you think about bowl invitations, think about the Sugar Bowl and the Sugar Vols, or even recent years where Tennessee wasn't going to bowl games that was that high level. Although last year the Orange Bowl was at that level. Tennessee is so attractive because of the traveling fan base, how the fan base will be there. I don't think we hear that often about different sites wanting to make sure they get the Gators because of all the traveling Florida fans. Florida's, of course, in the state of Florida, so it would be a little bit different with their bowl game. But yeah, I think Tennessee is definitely the answer. But part of it is what you're looking for. Like Caleb sees fans not showing up as a compliment to the fan base. I wouldn't put that in the pro category. I would say that's still more of a negative. Some would say, yeah, Florida fans throwing bags of stuff at fans, hey, that creates a rowdier environment. So that's more of a positive for them. I would look at that more as a negative. So part of it is what you're looking at. But overall, fan support, the carry of the fan base, I think you're traveling internationally and having a better chance of running into a Tennessee fan sporting their orange and the power tee than you probably are with a Gator fan.
I'm going to kick to Caleb, remind you that portions of the program brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry. How about the Fire Opals, a Tennessee tradition? RickTerryJewelry.com. That is RickTerryJewelry.com, and he's local, so support local businesses. I don't know, like Off the Hook Sports. Caleb?
I will say, one thing I will say with Tennessee fans that I think has actually hurt Tennessee in the past, and I do think that this was Alabama fans for decades after Bear Bryant, which is sometimes when you're so steeped in tradition, you think you have a rightful place at the top and that it's totally immune to who the coach is, to what the recruiting is or anything like that. That's how you hire a Derek Dooley who went 17-20 at Louisiana Tech, because you think that, oh, that's just going to automatically succeed at Tennessee because it's Tennessee. I don't think Florida has the same level of delusion in that regard. I think Florida fans are they made some bad coaching hires. Don't get me wrong. Ron Zook, and that was a bad hire on paper. But I do think Florida fans aren't delusional in the sense of thinking just because of the name on the jersey, we are going to be great. I think they have an understanding that you got to get the right coach and the right recruiting and the right NIL initiative, which they don't have right now. And so I'll say that in favor of Florida fans, but I'm still going to say Tennessee fans strike a right balance. Look, I've seen Tennessee sell out coming off a losing season. I've seen Tennessee fill up, like you talk about, Josh, bowl games all across the country. I just don't see that with Florida fans. And I also, and you guys brought it up, Tennessee's last win in the Swamp, for instance, that Hail Mary to James Banks, Florida was dead silent the second half of that game. And that's why Tennessee's offense got going.
Josh, Florida fans probably don't travel as much to bowl games because they're like 15 miles away. I don't know that that's that exciting to go to Orlando.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the state. But like if the Sugar Bowl is inviting Tennessee or Florida, they are going to expect a better traveling crowd from Tennessee fans than Florida fans, and I don't think there's any hesitation there. And New Orleans is a bit of ways from where a lot of Florida fans are. So Tennessee is up there near the top when it comes to traveling support. If we're talking about the fan base, it has to go beyond just football, which is king, but the environment to come to Knoxville for Tennessee baseball is much better than the environment going to Gainesville for Florida baseball.
So we all agree. I do, even though I play devil's advocate a little bit, that Tennessee is the better overall fan base. I think it's closer than it was when I started this whole thing back in the 90s. Are we completely over BVS, battered Vols syndrome? Should the fan base be over that? Because I talked to some people yesterday, like, what do you think about Florida? And I'm like, I feel for Tennessee really optimistic. And I'm like, I don't know. It just feels like that. BVS, somebody mentioned. Is that done and over with? I mean, if Tennessee loses, they lose because they didn't play their best game. But I don't think Tennessee's cursed anymore with battered Vols syndrome like they used to be. Josh, is that still a thing?
Well, it is for some. This week is a big week for that. Beating Alabama helped. Beating Florida last year helped because there was another streak building, and it had only been one time since 2004 that Tennessee had won in 2016. But now we're having this conversation about 20 years at the Swamp, and this is not a very good Florida team. At least it doesn't appear so to begin the season. So if Tennessee will be looking at 22 years since the last time it won in Gainesville, and it can't beat this team, and you mentioned John Pennington, he showed on the show this past week, this streak that exists has not occurred against a bunch of great Florida teams. Florida's largely been down for 15 years or close to it. Since Urban won the title in 2008, they had a couple of good seasons after that. So 15's a bit long. And they've had some teams that were able to win the East, but weren't elite teams. They just won the division while the division was going through some tough times. Tennessee's lost to some okay to legit bad Florida football teams. If they lose again to a Florida team that's going to have to fight its way to a bowl game with Tennessee coming off an 11-win season, then yeah, fans are going to say, okay, well, maybe we are cursed. Maybe it's not meant to be. So this is a big week to break some of that feeling.
Tom says, not yet. BVS is real. We have to be back to drop the BVS. What if we put together like a commercial, Josh, that was like one of those medicine commercials where they say, suffering from BVS? Talk to your doctor about a hypo. Hypo can make things better. Hypo can turn things down. Look at what he did in 2022. May also cause complete lung dysfunction, also spinal stenosis, and various other ailments, like they do with all those commercials with drugs that make you more afraid to take the drug than not to take the drug for your existing condition. Could we put together something like that?
Yeah, I would say so. Beat South Carolina as well. That needs to happen.
That's a BVS that wasn't that long ago. I mean, everything's cruising. That might have been the ultimate BVS kick in the BVS crotch.
That's the game that slided a lot for this week if you just look at the football stuff, because like on paper, Tennessee's better than Florida. Tennessee is a 7-point favorite roughly on the road against Florida. Tennessee is never favored in Gainesville. It doesn't happen. And Tennessee is favored by a touchdown in Gainesville. So if you look at the two teams, you're like, what? How's Tennessee losing this game? And then you can easily bring up, how was Tennessee going to lose to South Carolina until the Gamecocks put up 63? So, so this game in South Carolina, are important games for fans to feel like, okay, we are better than these other teams. We'll see what happens against Georgia. We'll see what happens in Tuscaloosa. Everybody recognizes the Vols will be underdogs in that game. But if Tennessee's for real and the program is back to being at a top 10 to 20 level, you win these games. You beat Florida when they're not as good as you. You maybe crush South Carolina at home, especially if it's a night game, to bring that back up. So yeah, the first two SEC games are huge for the BVS symptoms that might still be there.
Yes.
I'm actually going to push back on Josh's point though on
you
the
two. I mean, what do you two need to go in the parking lot and fight? This is 2 weeks in a row.
My older brother's name is Joshua. I've had enough fights with people named Josh over my life. But what I am going to say is that, Josh, I think it's out, with the exception of the Butch Jones years. I think Florida was usually better, almost always. I think 2014.
No, not true. I mean, like they just record wise, Tennessee finished ahead of. So I'm not even talking like which team was better. Tennessee had the better season like half the time.
Wait, outside of the 2013 to 2017, what year are we talking about here?
Well, over 20 years. I mean, in the 2000s, Tennessee football was pretty good. So,
okay, from 05 to 09, Florida had a better season every single year. Actually, 05, all 6 Urban Meyer years, Florida had a better season. And
07, Tennessee won the East. They lost to Florida 59-20.
They won it by default because they played the easiest schedule against the SEC West possible. Florida was clearly the better team that year. It's just Florida had to play LSU and Auburn from the West, and Tennessee got to play Mississippi State and Arkansas from the West. That's why,
which is why I said. But by the way, they went 8-4, so like that wasn't a great Florida team. You don't go 8-4 and then get to call yourself great. But the point was that Tennessee had better seasons. The record was better for Tennessee. If you win the East and Florida doesn't, your season's better than theirs. They were the better team. I agree with you. I agree with you, but that was not a great team. They also shouldn't have lost by 39 points.
Well,
that was awful. So there is no debate here, Caleb. If your record's better, if you win the East and the other team doesn't, your season's better.
So, Josh, Florida won the East in 2016, and Tennessee beat them.
Yeah, Tennessee wasn't any good that season. They went 8-4. They lost to South Carolina and Vandy.
They did. I'm just saying that. Okay,
that's not one of the seasons I'm counting. It was also in Knoxville when they played, not in Gainesville.
It was in Gainesville when they played in 2007. So I'm just bringing these things up, trying to mention, like, I think.
Yes, the point that I was making was that in Gainesville, Tennessee has lost over the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time, Tennessee was not losing to very good teams. That is my point. If your record's better, then one team is not obviously much better. It wasn't even a subjective. It was look at the records. One is better than the other. There's nothing to push back on.
Okay, Tennessee had a better record the way like sometimes Boise State had a better record than LSU. They played a much easier schedule.
If you want to call that 07 Florida team that went 8-4 a great team, have at it.
They went 9-3. They went 9-3, same record as Tennessee. And it was by default.
Okay, excuse me, 9-3. If you want to call it a great team.
No, I just said they were better than Tennessee. Tennessee won the East by default that year.
Okay, Florida was better than Tennessee in 2007. Hence the loss. Yes, correct.
My new favorite segment. I'm loving this. You guys are fantastic.
Well, Josh defended Butch Jones over Derek Dooley last week. I think Josh is just secretly a Butch Jones fan, and he doesn't want me to throw Butch Jones under the bus too much. Butch Jones is Josh's favorite coach.
Again, if you want to choose the team with the worst record, which is Derek Dooley's teams, over Butch Jones' teams that were much, much better, I
got 2017 for you. 4-8, worst record in SEC history for Tennessee in their SEC.
Derek Dooley didn't win a game in 2012 against an SEC team. He went 0 for just like Butch Jones did. 0-7 versus 0-6.
Yes, he did. That is true. 0-7. That is true because they fired Derek Dooley a week later after they fired Butch Jones. That's
correct.
That's a fair point.
Wow, when it comes to these two guys, who's up for a verbal debate?
I'm your Huckleberry.
Either one. I love it. New segment. It's Ward versus Calhoun each and every week. Josh, I love you. You get closing thoughts.
Yeah, I think Tennessee's going to win on Saturday against Florida.